God's children said. Amen. Have a seat. Have a seat. Can we thank Nicolette? What a beautiful song. She's got an even more beautiful one coming here in a few minutes. So as we get started this morning, I want to personally thank Nathan for the amazing sermon, exceptional sermon he had last Sunday. It was outstanding. If you were here, it was just typical Nathan work, deep rooted in the gospel and funny and lots of visuals and all those kind of things. But I think it reflects how blessed we are with such a deep and wide preaching team. So much so that everyone's going to get a turn at the pulpit at Advent. We do that both in the summer and at Christmas time. What I love about our Advent sermon series that is coming this year is that each preacher has chosen a unique and different passage that is atypical of this time of year. So what happens typically in a lot of churches is you parade out Luke 2 and then you just beat that thing to death, man. You just pull it apart. And we're going to do a little bit of Luke 2 at some point, probably Christmas Eve. But what we're going to do is we're going to be reminded that this entire book is pointing to the coming Messiah, the revelation of his incarnation, his crucifixion, and his resurrection, which in turn is the story of our own birth, death, and new life. That the entire book is about Christmas. So let's jump in. Before I say anything else, do anything else, I need to give a disclaimer, okay? So here's my disclaimer. I do not hate Christmas. Contrary to what you've heard about me, contrary to what's been said publicly, contrary to some stuff that I hear is on Facebook, because I don't do that nonsense. But, in fact, I love Christmas. I love Christmas. I love the traditions of Christmas. I think the hymns we sing at Christmas is the best theology of the church, right? So Christmas hymns, I love all that. I do hate that for the most part, the people that are called by his name rarely have a Christmas that's about Jesus. I hate that it's been distorted by a culture into something that was never really intended to be. It feels like to me, maybe it's just me, that Jesus gets hijacked by the culture for the manipulation of greed, and I am disgusted that God's redeeming action in this world is used to celebrate us and not the Messiah. So you need to know my middle name is not Ebenezer. It is not. And that plenty of people over the years, for the last 13 years, have called me the Grinch that stole Christmas. It just falls off. It's like a badge of pride. It just kind of slips off of me. I do want to point out, though, that I have seen the movie, The Grinch Stole Christmas, right? And without the Grinch, Whoville will never discover the real meaning of Christmas. All right? So the Grinch is the hero in that movie. That's me. That's me right there, right? All that being said, I often wonder if Jesus returned in Christmas time, or December, and took a look around at Western American Christmas, what would he think? I often picture him just perplexed, just standing a little bit at a distance, with his arms crossed, his hand over his mouth, and saying something like this. So let me get this straight. This is how you've chosen to celebrate my birth. All these trappings that you claim to do in my name, but do not really represent me or why I came, is how you've chosen to celebrate my coming. I think he might ask the church, the modern church, you do remember, don't you, why I had to come, right? There was a big, huge, honking sin problem in the world, right? You remember that? I think Jesus would say, do you remember? There was a sin problem in the world, that's why I had to come. So you just need to know that Jesus used the phrase, big honking, long before I ever did, right? So maybe it's just me paraphrasing, but I'm just not sure that Jesus would recognize what most people call Christmas in his name. I'm just saying. I think we all know something is inherently wrong, but we refuse to change course. We refuse to change our ways, and instead, we just rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic and seem surprised when the Christmas ship sinks. I've had calls from pastors over the last month because you may not realize this, but anybody who does ecclesial work already knows this, that the Christmas calendar this year is a little bit tight, right? Because Sunday is the 23rd, Monday is the 24th, which is Christmas Eve, and Tuesday, well, anybody who's in this community knows on Tuesday, Christmas Day, we as a church open the doors and we celebrate Christmas on Christmas Day because it's Christmas Day, right? It's named after him, right? And so we all know this, right? And so they wanted to know, was Georgiana canceling Sunday services or not having services on Christmas Eve since there would be back-to-back and to back church services. And then they asked me, they said, are you worried about attendance issues? So here's what I said. I said, I believe in giving as many opportunities as we can to introduce people to Jesus Christ at Christmas time. That we are not focused on attendance. I don't anticipate that everybody will go to all three, but we feel a sense of responsibility to pour living water as many times as we can for as many people to hear the gospel so that those who do not know Jesus have an opportunity to do what? Know Jesus. Attendance is a choice. Faithfulness on our part, staff's part, leadership part, is to provide as many choices as possible. I really do. This is going to sound naive, but I really do believe the Bible, when it says, when two or more are gathered in my name, I will be there. So Luis and I will be here. If three others join us, you're going to get the same sermon, the same music, the same plan, because we believe that where Jesus is gathered, we ought to gather too, right? Why would we alter Christmas simply because the calendar doesn't cooperate with how we think it ought to be done, right? So I think what's behind this is what they're trying to get around is that you would actually have 3 days of church. It just feels like too much Jesus, right? I mean, like 3 days of church? Like, I mean, we got people in this church won't come again at night if we offer something at night because, hey, I got all the Jesus I needed in the morning, right? But 3 days of Jesus, man, that's a lot of church. That's a lot of church. This is just what I'm thinking. I think all of this is an example of what people worry about at Christmas that has nothing to do with the mission of Jesus Christ. I have never been able to control who does or does not come on Sunday morning. I can only control the message that is delivered from this pulpit, and every time it's delivered, it will be the true and one gospel poured out for all to drink. Maybe it's just me. It may just be me because you know that I'm that kind of crazy guy. But it seems the way the church and most Christians do Christmas makes a statement that the way we think God chose to do it was really messed up. That God just did it wrong. I mean, because we could help God do it so much better if we had done it the way we think it ought to be done. So we do it that way anyway, despite the fact that God didn't do it that way. It feels like we're rearranging the manger to suit our needs, like focusing on gift-bearing wise men more than humble go-and-tell shepherds. It often feels like to me that American Christmas is nothing more than manger manipulation, a commingling of Luke 2 and some selfish cultural indulgences. I worry sometimes that Jesus becomes nothing more than another church prop that we trot out at Christmas time and put in a manger, and then we put him away in January, never to be seen or heard from again. Did you know that the word Christmas is Latin for more Christ? I wonder, do our Christmases look like we're making room for more Christ, or are we making room for more other C words like commercialism, consumerism, chaos? The fact remains that for Christ to become more, something in your life is going to have to become less. This is the heart of Simple Christmas, a way of celebrating Jesus that cuts through all the clutter and keeps Jesus at the center of it all. The one benefit of Advent is that it forces us to pre-decide what the main thing is going to be at Christmas, long before Christmas Day gets here. Every decision has a price tag. Every choice has a potential investment for good or bad. You get to decide. We get to choose. The truth is that there's a lot of mixed messages at Christmas, and I just believe that none of them should come from the church. For the last month, I've seen Advent devotions. I told the church this morning, Janice and I get all these advertisements for devotions and blogs and all this kind of stuff. So the Christmas Advent devotions have been titled like this: The Best Christmas Ever, Putting Hope Back in Christmas. Christmas like you've never experienced it have been the title to these daily devotions. All these titles affirm the illusion that this year is finally the year that Christmas is to be remembered. All the while admitting that none of us have reached the nativity promised land yet. None of us have had that Christmas to remember. So let me just be personal for a moment and kind of share a story out of our life. And I got Dee Dee's kind of permission to tell the story, not fully, but kind of. I told her it might happen. That's how it worked. Let me share with you what Christmas at our house, at the Calhoun house, looked like last year, which is infamously known at our house now as the Christmas to forget. That's how we remember it. That's what this is. It proved fully that you can have all the trappings of Christmas and disappointment still might await you at the end of the day on December 25th. So here's the backstory. Dee Dee and I are in the glorious empty nest years of our life, and we are loving it. We are happy, stupid, happy, loving it. Like, woo, like if you have teenagers, hang on. The best is coming. It's coming. It's right around the corner. People dread it. Don't dread it. It is heavenly. I'm just telling you right now. It's amazing, right? So we're enjoying. So our boys are gone, having been successfully launched into life and careers. Chris, however, is still available for prearranged marriages if you're interested. Kyle seems to be off the market, but Chris, I'm happy to entertain some of those thoughts. The boys are rarely home. They are rarely home. This is the story of boys, right? We have grown to accept as a byproduct of healthy launching that they're not home very much. We miss them, but we're really proud of their life and the way they're forging ahead with it and the choices they're making. For example, last week, Dee Dee and I did an empty nest Thanksgiving in Santa Fe, New Mexico. You may ask yourself, why Santa Fe? So I could return home and eat the Thanksgiving food of my people. Chili rellenos, enchiladas with red sauce and not tomato sauce. Real red sauce, right? I'm talking about. It was the food of my people that drew us back to Santa Fe, New Mexico, because we can. We don't have any children at home, right? And because I'm also married to a football fanatic, we were able to go and see our own Nick Smith, a member of this church who plays football at the University of Wyoming, play against the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. It was great. We got to do all the things we love. This is what empty nesting looks like before grandchildren, right? This is what it looks like. Changes when grandchildren come, right? Stepinas, it changes, right? But the Christmas expectations are supposed to be vastly different than the Thanksgiving ones, right? And while the boys are rarely home, both had promised to be home last Christmas. Then early in December, Chris, who was a trauma nurse at Shands in Gainesville, and did I tell you that he was single? Have I shared that yet? I don't know if I've done that yet. So anyway, he's single. He offers to work Christmas Eve and Christmas Day so the people in his unit who have families can be home Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. Now this is incredibly noble, and it's incredibly generous, and it's incredibly thoughtful, and we're super proud of him for him making that decision. Of course, the consequences of that are going to be felt in our home, his nobleness and kindness and generosity. Kyle, who was supposed to be home as well, was going to go with us to Haiti. So our plan was, our Christmas gift to each other, was all four of us were going to go to Haiti. Kyle has never met his sisters, and so we were going to take him to Haiti so that he could meet the girls, and we were going to go from the 26th to the 30th or something like that. So Kyle calls us and says, about a week before Christmas, says, listen, the firm has told him that a trial has moved up and that he has got to go back to San Francisco on the 26th and do depositions. He cannot go to Haiti. Disappointment at our house is beginning to build. It's beginning to rise. So I picked Kyle up from the airport on the 22nd and got in the car on the phone, which is how I knew he was my son, because he was on the phone, right? So that's how I recognized him. And he's on the phone with the office, and he's talking to me. And so 10 minutes, we're driving down the road. 10 minutes, he gets off the phone and says, hey, Dad, I've got to answer a super important email. Can we just ride in silence for a little while so I can concentrate on this email? Sure. And we drove, right? We pull into the driveway. He closes his laptop and he goes, so, Dad, how are you? Just doesn't skip a beat, right? I said, well, I'm pretty good. I've got to go back to the office because Christmas Eve's 2 days away, and I've got to tweak my sermon, but it's good to see you too, son. So with the exception of Christmas Eve services and Christmas Day services, Kyle was in our home, but working 18 hours a day in our home office with the door closed. He's on the phone, he's on his computer, he's on a laptop, the whole nine deal. He even missed Christmas dinner, so we made him a plate. We didn't have to slide it under the door, but we did have to take it into him, where he waved, thanked us, and said, close the door on the way out. So he was physically present, but not emotionally with us. As a parent, it's painful to watch your children work really, really hard and be helpless to do anything about it, right, to change that reality. At the same time that this is happening, Chris is heading back to Gainesville. And intellectually, Dee Dee knew that she had to put her baby in the car to send him back to work on Christmas Eve because he was a really good guy, but was unprepared emotionally for what she would feel welling up inside of her, knowing that her other son was unavailable because he was working so hard. You know that old saying, when mama ain't happy, daddy is miserable. That's the rest of that saying, right? Behind our bedroom door, misery was all we knew for 4 straight days. It was, right? On top of that, all weekend, I just kept hearing the song, Cats in the Cradle, in the back of my mind. You know, it was like, cats in the cradle and a silver spoon, little boy blue in the man. I hummed it like it was a Christmas carol for 4 straight days. It was just crazy. Now, to be clear, the issue was all about our expectations at Christmas. Dee Dee and I, we both understood that the boys are in the wood chopping phase of their life, right? We understand this. This is the dues they pay. This is what it looks like. We both did it. We knew that. But we had prepared for the perfect Christmas. And then it didn't happen. And it didn't happen. Dee Dee just cried every night as we went to bed. Because it didn't happen. Listen, life happens to us all. Expectations are unmet. People get sick. Plans change at the last minute. Flights are canceled. Life happens and nothing is guaranteed. No matter what you've planned, no matter what you've cooked, no matter what you've bought, and no matter what you've expected, life happens. Now listen, Kyle felt awful. I mean, he really, really felt bad. So I need to finish this story to say, so much so, he went back home and got his firm in San Francisco to send a financial gift to Tabitha's house, our orphanage, to make up for the fact that he got robbed of his Christmas, right? And then on Mother's Day, some of you may remember, he showed up the Friday night before Mother's Day and surprised his mom. We didn't know he was coming, knocked at the door at 10:30 at night, scared us to death, right? Because we're empty nesters, right? So he showed up for the weekend. So of course, you know what I did in the shadow of that? I sat by the door Friday before Father's Day, and I sat, and I sat, and I sat, and I sat. And finally, about midnight, Dee Dee comes and said, "Geez, honey, you look so pitiful. Just get up and go to bed." He never did come. It's all right. I'm over it now. So listen, you can manipulate the manger all you want. You can have the perfect meal planned. You can have the tree trimmed, and you can have purchased all the perfect gifts. But it still does not guarantee a perfect Christmas, at least defined by the expectations of culture. God has one expectation for our Christmas, and that it would be that Jesus Christ is the focus of your Christmas. Christmas is a personal invitation to a party that's coming 33 years later after the tomb is emptied. Christmas is a holy save the date. The best is yet to come. That's all Christmas is. It's a holy save the date. Georgiana is in its 13th year of Simple Christmas, our united effort to return the church's focus back to Christ and away from consumer-driven, culturally dictated, distorted version of Christmas. And much like our practice of Simple Christmas, it is intended to reduce the clutter so that we do not lose sight of Jesus during the holidays. So go to Luke 10. This is one of those passages that's often preached. Nobody would think of it as a Christmas passage, but in light of the Calhoun Christmas, it is definitely a Christmas passage. Go to Luke 10, verse 38. This is where we realize that most of our Christmases are filled with unclear, unmet, and unrealistic expectations. Verse 38 says, as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he had to say. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. Martha's in the room. Just raise your hand. If you're the Martha in the room, just own it. It's going to be very freeing if you're that person, right? So the Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. And she came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? You can just hear that happen, right? This is family drama at Christmas, right? This is like the Walters house. Just like, it's crazy. Flynn saying, Daddy, don't you care? Anyway, so this is what happens, right? But look what Jesus says in verse 41. Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed. Indeed, only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. Here's my promise to you. If you will make Jesus the center of your Christmas, it will not be taken from you. It will not be taken from you. This passage reminds us that our focus is supposed to be on Jesus. Everything else is the trappings we use to create an environment of warmth and love to reflect the love of our Heavenly Father that he had for us in sending his Son. The fact is, at Christmas, we worry about many things, but oddly, one of them is not how much Jesus we're getting. Some of you might be feeling squeezed between the stress of work and the stress of family expectations, the stresses of Christmases to remember. You know, the number one thing newlywed couples stress about is how to split time between their families at Christmas time. I mean, when I meet with premarital couples, that's the number one worry on their life is how do we divide the time at Christmas time between my family and her family, or her family and his family, and they stress it, which mom's going to be mad and which one's going to be upset and which traditions are important, which ones are not important. All this, we spend hours discussing the single marital reality that is imposed on them by their families in the name of Jesus at Christmas time. So I give them all the same advice. Don't go to anybody's house. You're newlyweds. Stay at home and make love all day. It's the best advice I can give you. That's great advice. All right? Come on now. Listen, I think we want to blame others for our stress. We want to blame our families, our bosses. I know if Dee Dee could have gotten her hands on Kyle's boss that weekend, it would have been like throwing a baby gazelle to a hungry lion. It would have been ugly, because I watched her 4 days, weeping and gnashing of teeth, both simultaneously happening. It was ugly. The thing is that work doesn't stress us out. People don't stress us out. Worry does. Worries about pleasing people, worries about deadlines, worries about not missing out, worries about not getting what we want, worries about having the perfect Christmas. Paul tells us in Philippians 4, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your request to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Some of us in the room today desperately needs our hearts and minds guarded by Christ Jesus. Otherwise, your Christmas is going to be a mess. The fact is the Bible leaves no wiggle room for worry. It's why Jesus says, Martha, Martha, you worry about many things. What if we could decide this morning that anxiety and worry would not fill our Christmases? You see, I think simplicity is a beautiful word that struggles to find traction in our Mach 3 culture. I really do believe more of us are looking for simple. People want a life that works at the pace that is sustainable. I believe people want clear direction and purpose. They want a roadmap that helps them keep the main thing the main thing. But we live in a world full of endless white noise and clutter that creates disequilibrium and leaves people feeling exhausted and frustrated more and more. The irony is that I have found that simplicity rarely feels simple. I know people who are just grinding it out day after day after day without any joy, and simplicity feels like some sort of utopian dream. Everywhere I travel and speak, I hear words that are disguised as a plea for simpler life. I hear from pastors who are exhausted and overwhelmed and overscheduled and stressed out, and they feel like their church did that to them. And many of them are bitter and resentful. It is why 50 pastors a week in America quit their job and walk away from ministry. 50 a week, 200 a month, 2,400 a year, literally walk away from ministry because of what they believe the church did to them. I know pastors who despise Christmas. And everywhere you look, people's lives are cluttered and confused and complex and confronted by the fragility of life, both in the church and outside the church. And all the time, they are refusing to come unto Jesus. Last spring, I did a leadership workshop in Texas. It was 2 days. I taught on the principles of simple church that we use here and the principles of simple Christmas. They loved it. Loved it. 200 leaders in the room, big kind of deal. It was crazy. They unanimously realized that day that they had turned Christmas into an idol. And they had been worshiping this idol for 10, 15 years, and they had created legalized expectations around it. For example, when we created Simple Christmas and chose not to put a Christmas tree in our narthex, it was one tree. This church of 8,500 in Texas has 23 live Christmas trees in their church at Christmas time. It's a big decision to not put those up. Anyway, on that day, they committed unanimously that they were going to adopt Simple Christmas. It was funny, the enthusiasm, the joy, it was palpable, it was incredible. They were going to focus on reducing obligatory gift spending to give difference-making gifts to parachurch ministries and focusing on Jesus and family on Sundays as we have dedicated our lives to. And they would eliminate unnecessary decorating and extra services and focus on Jesus. There'd be no children's program, there'd be no Christmas cantata, there'd be no decorating of the tree, there'd be none of that typical stuff that you'd find in a typical Christian church. So they launched it last Sunday, and the pastor called me first thing Monday morning. He did not say, Corky, how are you? Or Merry Christmas, or how was your Thanksgiving? His opening line to me was, what have you done to me? What have you done to me? Right? I said, welcome to Grinchville. Welcome to Grinchville. I said, listen. Don't worry. The ghosts of Christmas past, they have a shelf life of a year. They'll die within a year. Just know, but they'll haunt you for a year. Then he sent me a copy on Tuesday of an email that was sent to him that looked so familiar to the one I received 13 years ago, accusing him of forever ruining their family's Christmas forever and ever, amen. Right? And blah, 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 right? So he just, I've spoken to him 4 times this week. I think he's trolling for a job. I think he thinks he might need a job. It's funny, isn't it, how subtle our idol worship becomes until it's confronted, and how quickly tradition trumps Jesus. Let that sink in for a second, how quickly tradition trumps Jesus. There should not be a single tradition that ever trumps Jesus. Listen, the world is not going to slow down, but it does not mean we have to speed up. The way we celebrate Christmas speaks volumes about what we've declared is important to us. There are so many voices that are shaping and informing our sense of identity that it can lead to confusion. All we have done here at Georgiana through Simple Christmas is to say to this, that we should not confuse ho, ho, ho with holiness. They are separate things. They should never be the same thing. Everywhere I go these days, people are overloaded with something, just crazy things, all kinds of choices. They're paralyzed by choices. Not only is it the number of choices that are increasing, but the speed with which you are having to make choices and work and play and all these kind of things. Everything's accelerating. I believe we suffer from option overload in this country. Did you know the average grocery store carries more than 30,000 products? When you walk into your grocery store, you have 30,000 choices at your fingertips that you've got to sift through and decide. Did you know that there are 85 different varieties of crackers? And that doesn't include the gluten-free people. They've got their own section, right? There are 285 varieties of cookies. In the chocolate chip family alone, there are 21 options. There are 20 varieties of goldfish, which seems ridiculous to me because one goldfish tastes just like another goldfish no matter what the outside package says, right? This I'm just telling you. I tested it. I had a pastoral field trip to Publix. And here's what spurred this on. Because I do most of the shopping at our house. I was at Publix, where shopping is a spiritual experience. And I was there, and I realized that the cracker cookie aisle has their own aisle. There's nothing on it but crackers and cookies, none of which we're supposed to eat because they're carbs and they're bad for us, right? I just thought, how is it you got your own aisle? Even the chip aisle, which is sacred, doesn't have its own aisle. They share it with bread, right? Cookies and crackers get their own aisle. It made no sense to me, right? In this ever-increasing world of complexity, I just felt like when it came to Christmas, the church generally piles on. The church is notoriously guilty of making life more chaotic. This is not why Jesus came. His whole birth was about invading a complicated world with a simple message of love. I don't know about you, but much of the complexity and clutter that exists in my life is because I allowed it to be there. I know that all of us face circumstances we don't control, but we have more control than we're willing to admit. I love the words of Henry Cloud, who said, "We are ridiculously in charge of our life." We are ridiculously in charge of our life. So here's Simple Christmas for those of you who are new to us and for a refresher for everyone else. It is to reduce obligatory giving. You know obligatory giving. The kind of gift you give to somebody because you anticipate they're going to give you a gift, and it's not anything you want, anything you need. This is where fruitcake came from, right? You stack them up by the front door, and you're ready to go. When somebody gives you something that you didn't want, you give them fruitcake. This is where that tradition came from, right? You know those sausage roll things, those sausages that come wrapped in that kind of stuff that last for 40 years, you give those things out like they're candy, right? Here's a sausage, right? Obligatory giving. We would reduce obligatory giving. We suggest you reduce this by 20% and then move to eliminate it altogether. Then take those resources, what you would spend on that, and make a difference in the world in the name of Jesus Christ, who came to make a difference in your life. Secondly, we would return the Sabbath back to the Lord and make it a day for Jesus and family and intimate friends only. That we wouldn't do Christmas parties, that we wouldn't go shopping, that we wouldn't spend the day being anywhere else but with family and in the Lord's house, right? That we would turn some things down. And lastly, the church committed not to fill the calendar with extra stuff that's only going to make you feel guilty about missing it. We're going to worship Jesus each Sunday in here during Christmas, just like we do in April, just like we do in August, just like we do in October. It's going to be the same because Jesus hasn't changed. We're just going to worship Jesus, plain and simple. Simple Christmas is about identifying the greater yes and learning to say no to some things. It's okay at Christmas time to say no to some things because every no is rooted in a higher yes. When our values are clear, decisions get simpler. Here's the formula I use for simple Christmas, simple church. I'm going to give away the secret sauce today. I think about it every time we plan anything. Clarity plus courage plus calendar equals simplicity. Clarity plus courage plus calendar equals simplicity. Clarity means that is equal to what matters most to you. What are the things you value? And here we've declared the greater value is the love of God through Jesus Christ, his Son, and that we would exist to give ourselves away as he did. Courage equals the resolve to make a change. It takes courage to eliminate the non-essential in our life. It takes courage to tell somebody no, that you won't go do that because this is not what you're going to do on this day. And then the calendar is the discipline to execute. This is where our priorities and our values get operationalized. If we're not careful, seriously, if we're not careful, our calendar can begin to look a little bit like that junk drawer at home. Everybody's got a junk drawer at home. You know the drawer that you open and you slide stuff into because you don't know where else it goes, and you're not sure you should throw it away because you might need it at some point, only to open that drawer when you move years and years later and go, why do we have this stuff in this drawer? Because it's a junk drawer. It's where I put all my junk. The empty boxes for cell phones and enough cables and cords to attach yourself to the space station if you had to. I mean, everything goes in that junk drawer. And pretty soon, your life can look like that junk drawer. Clarity plus courage plus calendar equals simplicity. Let me close with this. We wanted to offer some simple Christmas giving opportunities that can crush some of the world's greatest challenges. Did you know that Americans, not the world, Americans spent $8 billion on Cyber Monday this past week? $8 billion. Counting what we spent on Black Friday and Saturday, it's another $4 billion. So we spent, as a nation, $12 billion on ourselves, in all likelihood for stuff we don't even need. Do you have any idea what $12 billion solves in this world? We could solve the entire lead-driven drinking problem in Detroit that has plagued that city for God knows how long with a portion of that money. $12 billion solves a lot of problems. It interrupts a lot of brokenness and despair. So this is what we want to do. We've chosen Exodus Road, which is a ministry that eliminates sex trafficking and actually physically goes in and rescues young boys and girls who are trapped in this disgusting violation of their human rights. It's a ministry connected to FAI that we've been partnering with in the past that's done some work in northern Iraq and some rescue work in southern Syria that we've been involved in. Secondly, we will also split an offering between the Alternative Pregnancy Center in Merritt Island and Pregnancy Resources in Melbourne because we believe in the sanctity of life and we believe that the unborn matter. And we also believe that you shouldn't just declare that you then should come alongside mothers who've made difficult decisions to keep their children and support them. Third, we're going to provide a gift to Helen's House, which is part of the Seed of Mission in Melbourne, which focuses on homeless women and children who have been struggling with addictions. We have an opioid problem in this country that is just fueled by the pharmaceutical companies that continue to make it despite the fact that we're killing the millennial generation with this drug. So we're going to step in and make a difference. Lastly, we've chosen to give a gift to a Methodist church in Port St. Joe, which was completely destroyed by Hurricane Michael. We're going to give them a gift to help them rebuild their sanctuary. Right? So currently this morning, Port St. Joe United Methodist Church is worshiping in their parking lot where they've been worshiping since the hurricane. And also Monday through Friday, they're providing relief from their parking lot because that's what a church does. See, a church doesn't need a building to be the church. And so we're going to come alongside. We're not going to build it all for them, but we're going to give them a gift. It's going to offer them some hope. It's going to give them back on the road. Choose one, choose all four. But whatever you choose so with the idea that we exist to give ourselves away, just as God did when he sent his one and only Son as an atoning sacrificial gift for us. Simple Christmas is about restoring Jesus Christ as the priority in a season named in his honor. It's just that simple.